I've always been a rational guy. Skeptical, even. The kind of person who rolls his eyes at ghost stories, dismisses creaking noises as nothing more than old houses settling, and brushes off chills down the spine as just the wind. That all changed one night. It started out like any other weekend. My parents were out of town, my younger sister was at a friend's house, and I had the house to myself. I wasn't doing anything special, just scrolling through my phone, watching videos, and enjoying the rare silence. For once, I didn't have to deal with anyone else's noise. I could just be alone with my thoughts, or so I thought. It was late, maybe around midnight. I'd been sitting on the couch for hours, immersed in some mindless show, when I heard it. A soft thud. I paused the video, listening. At first, I thought it was just the house making one of those random noises old homes do. It creaked and groaned from time to time, especially at night when the temperature dropped. But then, there was another thud, louder this time. It sounded like something heavy being moved across the ceiling. Now here's the thing. There's no attic in our house. At least, not a real one. Just a small crawl space above the ceiling. Barely enough room for storage. So whatever that sound was, it didn't make sense. I stood up, the hair on the back of my neck standing on end. I walked into the hallway, listening carefully. Nothing. Maybe it was just a raccoon or some other animal that had gotten into the crawl space. I tried to brush it off, but deep down, something about the sound didn't sit right with me. I was about to head back to the living room when I heard it again. This time, a dragging sound. Something, or someone, was moving up there, right above my head. My throat tightened. I've always been the kind of guy who prides himself on being logical. But in that moment, logic failed me. My brain couldn't make sense of what I was hearing. I grabbed my phone, my hand trembling as I dialed my dad. It rang twice, then went to voicemail. I hung up, suddenly feeling very alone in the house. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe the sound was coming from outside, or maybe a tree branch was scraping against the roof. But no, it was too distinct, too deliberate. Just as I was about to call again, a loud bang echoed through the house. It was so close it felt like it was right above me. My heart leapt into my throat, and my pulse started to race. I didn't want to believe it, but there was no denying the truth anymore. Someone was up there. I grabbed the nearest thing I could find, a heavy wrench from the garage, and made my way back to the hallway. My legs felt like they were made of lead, every step bringing me closer to that unknown presence. I stood there, staring up at the ceiling, willing myself to be calm, to think straight. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps. They were coming from directly above me. My body went cold. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Whoever was up there wasn't an animal. The sound was unmistakable. Someone was walking around in my ceiling. I swallowed hard, my mouth dry, and shouted, "Who's up there?" Silence. For a moment, everything went still. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Then there was a loud, scraping sound, followed by more footsteps, this time faster, more insistent. Whatever or whoever was up there was moving towards the access panel in the hallway. My fight or flight instinct kicked in, and flight won. I bolted back into the living room, barely thinking, just reacting. My hands fumbled with the front door lock, my heart racing so fast I thought it would explode in my chest. As I threw open the door, I glanced back, just in time to see the attic panel slowly begin to open. I didn't wait to see who or what would emerge. I ran, sprinting across the lawn to my neighbor's house, adrenaline surging through my veins. I pounded on their door, shouting for help until the lights inside flickered on. The police arrived within minutes. They searched the house from top to bottom, including the crawl space above the ceiling. But they didn't find anything. No signs of forced entry, no evidence that anyone had been inside. The panel was closed when they arrived, and there was no sign it had been tampered with. I could barely believe it. I knew what I had heard, what I had felt. I wasn't crazy. There was someone, something, up there with me. But without any evidence, the police couldn't do much. They chalked it up to my imagination, to stress, to the house settling. But I knew better. I refused to stay in that house alone again after that night. Even now, years later, the memory haunts me. Every time I hear a creak in an old building or a soft thud in the night, I'm taken back to that moment, standing in the hallway, staring up at the ceiling, knowing something was there. And the worst part, I never found out who or what it was. But sometimes, late at night, when I'm lying in bed in the quiet of my apartment, I can still hear those footsteps above me, and I wonder, will it happen again? I live alone in a cramped apartment on the 5th floor of an old building. My life is a monotonous routine. Work at the office by day, solitude at night. I had grown accustomed to this quiet existence, relishing the comfort of silence after long days filled with noise and stress. Until that fateful evening, my life was unremarkable. As I returned home one chilly autumn night, the sun had already dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows in the narrow hallways. I noticed something unusual taped to my apartment door. A plain white envelope, devoid of any marks, save for one word scrawled messily across the front: leave. A knot of unease formed in my stomach. I couldn't fathom who would leave such a cryptic message. My heart raced as I peeled the envelope from the door, glancing up and down the empty hallway. The dim light flickered overhead, casting eerie shadows that danced around me. What if it was a prank? I dismissed the thought, but couldn't shake the growing dread. Inside the envelope, a single sheet of lined paper contained another message, more unsettling than the first: you shouldn't be here. The frantic scrawl was smeared, as though it had been hastily written. A chill crept down my spine. I lived alone, hadn't shared my plans with anyone. So who knew I was out? And why did someone want me gone? At first I tried to convince myself it was just a cruel joke. But as the days turned into nights, the note lingered in my mind, refusing to let me rest. I felt eyes on me, a prickling sensation at the back of my neck. My once peaceful apartment became a prison, each creak of the floorboards echoing louder in my ears. I began double-checking locks and peering out of windows, convinced that someone was watching me. The incidents began small, easily dismissed as coincidence. A picture frame fell from the wall. The sound of my name whispered through the silence when I was home alone. I brushed these off as stress-induced paranoia. Yet with each passing day, the fear tightened its grip around me. One evening, while burning the midnight oil at my desk, the lights flickered and died. Darkness enveloped me, the sudden stillness wrapping around me like a shroud. My heart raced as I fumbled for my phone, its faint glow the only source of comfort. As my eyes adjusted, I noticed a flickering light emanating from beneath my bedroom door, a soft, ethereal glow like a candle. Fear gripped me, cold and unyielding. I approached the door, every step a battle against the instinct to flee. I could hear soft footsteps on the other side, the rustle of fabric brushing against something. My breath quickened, but curiosity drove me to reach for the handle. Throwing open the door, I was met with an empty room. The strange light had vanished. Confusion washed over me until I spotted it, a note lying on my pillow, as if placed there with purpose. I approached cautiously, heart pounding, and read the words scrawled across the page, "Last warning." This time the handwriting was different, thick, jagged letters that seemed to seethe with menace. Adrenaline coursed through me. I couldn't remain there any longer. I grabbed a bag, hastily throwing in a few essentials, my wallet, a change of clothes, my phone. I needed to escape this nightmare. As I stepped out of my apartment, the hallway felt different. The air was thick with a foreboding heaviness, and shadows seemed to stretch toward me, as if reaching out to pull me back. I made my way to the staircase, the sound of my footsteps echoing loudly in the eerie silence. Reaching the ground floor, I stepped outside into the night, gasping as the cool air hit my face. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears, drowning out the sounds of the city. I didn't stop running until I reached the bus station on the other side of town. The bus arrived, and I boarded, hoping to leave everything behind. I didn't know where I was going, only that I needed to get away from that apartment, from the notes, and from whatever force was haunting me. I sank into a seat, the warmth of the bus a stark contrast to the chill that clung to my skin. Hours passed as the bus wound its way through the darkened streets. I felt my eyelids growing heavy, but sleep eluded me. The memory of that last note loomed large in my mind. Last warning. It replayed over and over, a sinister chant that wouldn't let me rest. When the bus finally reached my destination, I stepped off. The new city feeling foreign yet strangely comforting. I was determined to start fresh, to escape the shadows of my past. But the lingering sense of being watched refused to dissipate. I found a modest motel, rented a room, and locked the door behind me. But as I settled in, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. The silence in the room was oppressive, filled with the echoes of my own heartbeat. The next morning, I discovered I had a voicemail on my phone. My heart raced as I played it. The message was static at first, but then a voice broke through, distorted yet familiar. "You can't run, David. You shouldn't be here." Panic surged through me. I hadn't shared my new number with anyone. My mind raced as I processed the implications. Who was behind this? Who knew my name? The room spun around me, and I stumbled back, feeling trapped in a web of dread. I spent the next few days in a haze, moving from one hotel to another, always looking over my shoulder, always fearing the worst. Each time I thought I was safe, another note would find its way to me. "You can't escape, or I will find you." The world outside felt like a twisted reflection of my fear, every shadow a potential threat. I became a ghost, drifting through life, constantly searching for a way to break free from the haunting specter of my past. I knew I couldn't live like this forever, but the thought of returning to my old life made my skin crawl. One night, as I sat in a dingy diner nursing a cup of coffee, I overheard a couple talking about an unsolved disappearance in the city. The mention of a name made my heart race. David. I felt the walls closing in around me, the reality of my situation crashing down like a wave. I couldn't help but wonder, was I the next name on that list? The chilling thought settled in the pit of my stomach. It became clear. There was no escaping the past. Someone or something was determined to see me gone. I fled the diner, panic driving my feet faster than ever. As I sprinted down the street, I could hear the whispers again, growing louder, taunting me. "You shouldn't be here." I didn't know how much longer I could run. Each step felt like a step closer to my end. I had to confront the darkness, face whatever was behind the notes, and reclaim my life. But as I turned a corner, I felt a hand on my shoulder. The chill of that touch sent shivers down my spine. "David," a voice whispered, low and menacing. I turned slowly, dread pooling in my stomach. The man standing before me wore a familiar smirk, and I felt my heart drop as recognition hit me. It was someone from my past, someone I thought I had left behind. "Welcome back," he said, his eyes glinting with a dangerous light. And in that moment, I realized there was no escaping what I had done, no running from the consequences. The true horror was only beginning. I never thought a weekend alone at my parents' farmhouse would turn into a nightmarish ordeal. As soon as they left for their business trip, I reveled in the freedom of being home alone, nestled in the remote outskirts of town. The old farmhouse had its charm, creaking and whispering secrets as the wind howled outside. The first night was a blissful retreat. I stayed up late, diving into movies, filling the silence with laughter from my friends over the phone. Little did I know that tranquility was a fleeting illusion. As the sun dipped behind the horizon on the second night, an unsettling feeling crawled up my spine. The shadows in the corners seemed to shift. The silence felt heavier. I dismissed it as paranoia, a byproduct of isolation, but something was definitely off. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, as if unseen eyes were trailing my every move. Later that evening, I prepared for bed, mentally shrugging off the strange sensations. It was just my imagination, I told myself. But then, just as I nestled under the covers, I heard it. A distinct knock on my bedroom window. My heart raced. We were miles from the nearest neighbor, surrounded by nothing but dense woods. Who could possibly be out there? I hesitated, my breath catching in my throat. Cautiously, I tiptoed to the window and peered through the thin curtain. The old oak tree swayed in the wind, its branches brushing against the glass. But there was no one there. I exhaled, trying to calm my nerves, convincing myself it was just a branch. Yet, deep inside, a cold shiver slithered down my spine. I pulled the curtains tight, sealing out the encroaching darkness. As I lay there, desperately trying to fall asleep, I heard it again. This time, it came from my bedroom door, a slow, deliberate knock that sent chills racing through me. I shot upright in bed. "Hello?" I called, my voice barely above a whisper. The silence that answered felt like a weight pressing down on me. Then came another knock, more insistent this time. My heart pounded in my chest like a war drum, each beat a reminder of my isolation. I grabbed my phone, dialing my parents' number, praying for a connection, but it went straight to voicemail. The storm must have knocked out the cell service, leaving me utterly alone. The knocking persisted, relentless and unnerving. Gathering my courage, I moved toward the door, my hand hovering over the doorknob. "Who's there?" I managed to ask, my voice trembling. The knocking stopped, replaced by an eerie silence, and then it came. A voice low and raspy, whispering through the door. "Let me in. Insert my name." Terror coursed through me like ice water in my veins. I stumbled back from the door, panic gripping me. I had to get out. Frantically, I raced to the window and threw it open. The branches of the old oak tree reached out like skeletal fingers, offering a perilous escape. It was risky, but there was no time to waste. As I climbed out onto the branch, I heard the bedroom door splintering, the sound tearing through the stillness like thunder. I couldn't look back. Adrenaline surged as I scrambled down the rough trunk, scraping my hands and knees against the bark. I hit the ground, running, the forest swallowing me whole as I sprinted toward the tree line. Behind me, I could hear heavy footsteps crashing through the underbrush, closing in, growing louder. My legs burned, my lungs screamed for air, but I didn't stop. I ran until I reached the main road, my heart racing, every instinct telling me to keep moving. A car approached, and I waved my arms frantically, crying out for help. The engine roared past, drowning my voice in its wake. Finally, a second car slowed down, the driver's concerned gaze meeting mine. I stumbled in, breathless and shaking, and relayed the horrifying events. The police were called, but when they arrived at the farmhouse, they found nothing. No signs of an intruder, no broken windows, nothing but the stillness of the night. Every door had been locked from the inside, every window undisturbed. I was left with only the echoes of fear and the chilling memory of that voice whispering my name. I never returned to the farmhouse. I couldn't shake the feeling of the unseen guest lingering in the darkness. In the years that followed, I tried to forget. I tried to convince myself it was a figment of my imagination, a trick played by the isolation of the old house. But every night, as I drifted off to sleep, I would hear that knock, that whisper, and I knew, somewhere in the shadows, I was still being watched. And sometimes, when the wind howled just right, I could almost hear that voice again, calling me back to the farmhouse, beckoning me to let it in.